Hey, welcome to the No Spearo Podcast. I am your host, Isaac, aka Shrek. Welcome to the No Spearo Podcast. This is the home of interviews with spearfishing experts, authorities, and characters from around the world. Today, fantastic. We're off to Isla Morada, which is part of the Florida Keys, and to rejoin Ed Martin. He was with me a couple of episodes ago where we did the DIY wooden timber gun, speargun episode, and kind enough to join me for another interview. This time we dig into his story and background in spearfishing, some of the things he's learned along the way, and we dig deep into sort of spearfishing and freediving in the Florida Keys. It's a cool episode. I love it. Before we get there, let's hook into a bit of news from the spearfishing world. Just in the last few days, well, the last few weeks now when this goes live, a spearfishing legend has left the building. Jay Rife has left us, age 82. From California, founded an amazing company that makes an amazing equipment. It's changed the face of spearfishing, and sponsored some amazing divers along the way and built some amazing products. Jay Rife, he's no longer with us. So, it's just awesome to say thank you, really, for the amazing contribution he made to spearfishing as a whole. So I'm sad to see him go, but age 82, he had a good run, and he left a legacy, that's for sure. On a lighter note, Guy from at Vin_bag on Instagram sent me a bag of vino in the mail, just all class. I was thinking, here comes another cask of goon, they call it in Australia. There's names for wine in a bag all around the world, I'm sure. But absolutely high quality wine arrived in the mail. I was actually trying to go dry, so thanks for that, Guy. Smashed that whole cask with my housemate and woke up the next morning and felt pretty good, actually. But, it was a good drop. Thanks, man. Quick review from Ethan Yo. He says, the best podcast. Big call. Hey, Shrek and Turbo, when it comes to spearfishing, I'm still such a noob. Ha. I'm so glad, though, that my mate introduced me to your podcast a couple of months ago, and since then, I'm pretty sure I've managed to listen to every single one of your podcast episodes. I love the banter between you guys and your sense of humor, especially the weight jokes. Sorry, Shrek, with a winky emoji. It's pretty harsh, Ethan. Anyway, his review goes on, but love the reviews, guys. Wherever you listen to the show, if you leave a review, it always helps, and that keeps the stoke going. Let's get into this episode. Ed Martin, Florida Keys, loving it. This special episode of the Noob Spearo Podcast is brought to you by spearfishing.com.au. Longtime partners of the Noob Spearo Podcast, spearfishing.com.au have a listener deal. Use the code NoobSpearo to save $20 on every purchase over $200. Thanks for supporting the Noob Spearo Podcast and shopping with spearfishing.com.au. This episode of the Noob Spearo Podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at noobspearo.com/audible. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Who uses those? Anyway, noobspearo.com/audible. All right, welcome to the Noob Spearo Podcast. Ed, it's the second time for you. We got lost in the weeds with building spearguns last time. It was an absolute fantastic chat. It's great to have you back.
Thanks, Shrek. This time I won't say anything.
Nah, man, it's all good. I had a blast chatting spearguns. We got geeked right out, and I don't even think we scratched your knowledge. So it'll be cool to talk a little bit more today about that. And I'm really looking forward to digging into today's Veterans Vault, which is spearfishing in the Florida Keys. So this should be helpful for anyone in that area who's looking to start out spearfishing in the Keys area. So, and whereabouts is Killshot Spearguns located?
So we are located in sunny Isla Morada, Florida. We're at mile marker 81.9. And if you're not familiar with the area, everybody talks about mile markers because we're, Key Largo begins at like mile marker 106 or something like that. Goes all the way down to mile marker 0. Cool.
And you've got a shop there. Do you sell everything in there?
I've got a little bit of everything. Freediving and spearfishing wise, I don't carry I don't carry regs and BCs and things like that. There's probably 200 dive shops between Key West and Key Largo that carry all that. Oh. But I think there's 2 shops on all of the Keys that specialize in spearfishing
Oh, sweet.
and freediving. So, yeah.
Cool. We'll have to name your competitors later in the Veterans Vault. No, I'm just joking with you. Look, it's great to have you on the show. You're a patron listener. You've been listening to the podcast for a little while, so you know the deal. I wanted to talk about your background, how you got into the water, and what started this love affair.
Oh, God. When I was a kid, you couldn't get me out of the pool. Later on, when I was a teenager, I was lucky enough to live in West Africa, and we had, I don't know, a couple 100 miles of beaches, and those beaches didn't have people on them. So it was pretty cool. I graduated high school in Monrovia, Liberia. It was prior to the big civil war that they had there.
Wow.
But it was a really wild place. The fishing there was off the hook. I was given a spear gun back then. I think it was like 1984. I was given a spear gun. I was 16 years old, and it's funny. I had this crappy little pipe gun with 2 bands on it, and didn't really know what I was doing with it. And the guy that gave it to me, he was an avid diver, but he's like, just get in the water and shoot fish. Okay, perfect. We lived on a river, so the viz was like, I don't know, 5 feet, 10 feet. It was miserable. There were probably huge sharks in the water, but we never saw them, so they didn't exist.
Yeah.
We were actually more afraid of crocodiles, but again, we never saw them, so they might not have existed.
What about equipment and early species?
Well, I had this Voight spear gun, which was junk, but my parents were very supportive of pretty much anything I ever wanted to do. And I was a nearsighted kid, 4 eyes. And they took me when we were back in the U.S., before we went to Africa, they took me into a dive shop and they got me set up with a mask with prescription lenses in it. So that was awesome.
Oh, wow.
I think it was a big old U.S. Divers, back when U.S. Divers was actually a decent company and not selling total junk.
Yeah.
But anyway, I got a U.S. Divers mask. I had some Dacor diver fins.
I remember Dacor, or we called them Dacor in New Zealand.
Yeah.
That company's gone, isn't it?
Yes, finally. But I had those fins until I was 30. I think I threw them away when I was 35. So to give you, so I got them when I was 15 and they lasted until I was 35. That's pretty good.
That is pretty good.
Then, of course, I had a snorkel. But that was it. I had no clue what I was doing. And we had mangrove snapper in the river, and occasionally I'd get lucky and shoot one. But for the most part, the river was really hard to fish. If you went up near the river mouth, the spearfishing got a lot better, but I wasn't able to get up there very often.
Okay.
The visibility was pretty good up there. It was 15 to 20 feet.
Yeah, right.
And I remember popping a barracuda one time, and thank God the flopper did not engage. Because that fish would have kicked my butt.
They tear people up too.
Oh, yeah. Well, I had no clue what I was doing. And, I reached out and pulled the trigger, hit the fish, and he ran off. And, but he was all the way at the end of the line. And, man, I had no clue what I was doing. I probably would have lost the gun.
I've seen a guy up on the Sunshine Coast here in Queensland, and he was attacked by one he shot. It first went for his friend, and then it ended up burrowing into like his groin, like near his femoral artery and his junk, and somehow missed all of it narrowly. And but jeepers, what a horrible experience! Like they're bloody dangerous if you don't have really good shot placement.
Oh yeah. Well, that's one of those days when you pray for cold water.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I shoot barracuda all the time, and I'm careful about them. And you really have to respect that mouth. But I've never had one come at me or really, I guess, kick my ass. It's probably more luck than anything else.
So how did you learn? Like, I'm taking it you didn't have like a spearfishing club there and 18 instructors.
No, I was the only kid on the block that had a spear gun. Yeah, it wasn't a big sport there. I put it up when I went to college, and I went to University of Texas and just kind of put it away. And I didn't get back in the water and start spearfishing again for almost, 15 years.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I was in my 40s. No, I take it back. I was in my 30s that I started spearfishing again. It was one of those things where I went out and decided I was going to get back in the water. My kids were old enough to where they didn't need constant attention. My wife was busy, so my days were free.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so I'd go out and whenever I was at home, I'd go out and go diving.
How did you find that? Did it make an impact on your life again?
Oh, of course, yeah. For me, spearfishing is not spearfishing, but diving is I totally relax in the water. It's kind of weird because, there's things that you're kind of apprehensive about and things that'll startle you, but I'm in the moment. I'm thinking about the next 30 seconds of my life. I'm not worried about my mortgage or, what somebody did to me at work or, what my deadlines are.
This is the bond we share, I think. Like everyone that's in love with spearfishing, it's cool to hear your experience. So you rediscovered it again later in life, and did the obsession start annoying people immediately, or did that come on gradually?
Oh no, I'm able to annoy people almost instantly. Funny story. At the time I was trying to dive as much as I could, and I lived up in Fort Myers, and the diving wasn't bad, but I really enjoyed diving in the Florida Keys. And I kept trying to figure out a way to get back to the Florida Keys. And one day my wife and I were talking, and she decided to come down with me for the weekend, and we found a studio. It was an art studio that she could put her business in. Okay. And at the time I was a consultant, so all I needed was an airport. And Miami Airport's 70 miles away. I can go anywhere. That was perfect for me. So we literally walked into this art studio, looked around, kind of kicked the tires. 30 minutes later, I was writing a check for the first year's rent.
That's awesome.
I was coming. And, 3 weeks later, we moved down to the Keys. Now, I was very disciplined. I left all my dive gear in Fort Myers. For the first 3 months. And I did it because I knew that the second that I brought it down, that would be it. I'm going to be off the hook. And, as it was, my wife and I would go snorkeling almost every evening as soon as we were done with work. We go out behind the house. Oh, yeah. So she's got all kinds of great stories about being terrified of barracuda and running into turtles and seeing tarpon. And
yeah, sick. That's cool. So she sort of shares a love for the water.
Yeah, she does. She won't admit it. She tries to tell everybody that she's afraid of it, but she's not. You get her in the water, and the second that her brain begins to relax a little bit, she doesn't, think about the man in the gray suit anymore. So she's a child of Jaws.
Yeah. It's affected generations of people, those movies, and sometimes we're glad, when like the selfish spear fishermen in us, I think, we're out in the water and no one's out there because they're terrified of sharks. And sometimes you don't even want to dispel their fears. You're happy to have it to yourself. But yeah, jeepers, it's really affected, the paradigm of millions of people. So
oh yeah,
it's bizarre.
Yeah, and anybody that spearfishes has seen sharks, and you realize immediately that they're not going to come in and eat you. There's that chance that things could go wrong, but I look at some of the crazy crap that's happened out there, and I still have all my fingers and toes. So
yeah,
and I know darn good and well that if they decided that I was on the menu, I'd be shark shit by now.
Yeah.
So.
For guys starting out that are afraid of sharks, or guys that come into the shop and they're asking you about sharks, what do you kind of say to them?
Dive in bad viz so you don't see them.
Yeah. This is the funny thing. Like when you're in, 5 meters, 15 feet or less of viz, your chances of seeing a shark are quite remote, but they're there. They're just out beyond it. But then that makes the fear worse for people because it's like, and I find this the same, but like when you're surfing, I was always kind of worried about what was going on under the water. But then when you get your head in the water, I love being able to see what's underneath me. But And that's a good thing. Like, you can kind of manage sharks where you know where they are and what they're doing, and you can look at their body language and monitor them. But when you got crap viz, you can't see anything.
Oh, absolutely. So when I get people that walk in the shop, or when I get people that are first-time spear fishermen, we have the shark talk. And the worst thing you can do is tell somebody not to worry about it, because there's going to be a bull shark. The second they shoot a fish, a damn bull shark is going to come in and attack that fish, if they're not prepared for it. And if it doesn't happen that day, it's going to happen sooner or later. But what I always tell everybody is number one, you face the animal, you get your gun out in front of you, and you keep it between you and the shark. And if he comes in, you know, give him a poke. You know, don't try to poke the animal, but if he swims into it, don't be shy. You know, give him the business end. Never hit him with the butt end of the gun. That animal weighs 200 pounds, 300 pounds, and now you've got a sharp, pointy object right in your face. Yeah. That's a horrible idea. So you give them the business end. The other thing that I remind people of is that when we go to McDonald's and we pull up to the drive-thru, we don't expect to be shot and stabbed or murdered for our dinner. Yeah. Sharks, on the other hand, every time they eat, they have to kill something. And it's very much a life or death thing for them, because they potentially can get hurt. And if they get hurt, they may die. So you have to think about things a little bit differently when you're dealing with an animal, with a wild animal that potentially is dangerous. So, you know, I've never intentionally hurt a shark, but I have definitely stuck a few with a spear gun a couple of times. Yeah, and
it discourages them. Like, even though you're not hurting them or wounding them in any way, just that active fact of, oh, he could potentially hurt me, then they're a bit more wary of you. And that's all you need in order to spearfish around them effectively, is a little bit of respect. Even though they could crush you and just absolutely destroy you, if they're slightly worried about any form of risk from you, they're probably going to leave you alone.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing I tell people is don't look like prey. If a shark comes in, keep your eyes on it, face toward the shark, because you potentially can manage it with your hands and your spear gun. But if you turn around and you start swimming toward the boat, you know, you don't run away from a dog, because you trigger that prey instinct. And there's a guy I spearfish with from time to time, and he's afraid of sharks. And we had one come in one day, and it circled us, but he wasn't being particularly, he was just coming in to check us out. And we had shot a couple of fish, so they were kind of keyed up, but he was being polite. And all of a sudden I turn around and I look, and all I see is white water as he's swimming back to the boat. And I was like, oh, Jesus, you know, okay, good. Now I'm all alone. Thanks. You know, but
I've had the same. Yeah, I've had the exact same situation. Yeah. And it's understandable, and I empathise with it. But that back to back with your mates, even if there's a big school of sharks, so you got maybe three or four or more, and they're all aggressive and they've got that bloodlust up. You can still manage them sometimes, not all the time. Sometimes it's just crazy shit. But those times that happens, it seem to be few and far between, unless maybe they're out from you shooting cobia off huge bull sharks for some reason.
Oh yeah, the shark shield's a great piece of kit. I really believe that it works, and it works well, and I also believe that it doesn't affect fish, because I've had fish come in and just swim right over top of me while I've been wearing it, and it's been on, and they just don't care. But with sharks, and I'll give you my most recent one, we were out a few weeks ago on one of the wrecks, and it's well known to have sharks on it. And the guy shot a big jack, and seconds, 3-4 seconds, there were 4 bull sharks on this jack. And he was right underneath the boat. So he just climbed on the boat. And I'm sitting there looking at the boat, you know, I'm 30, 40 feet away from it, thinking, oh, great, you know, this is going to suck. And so I reached down, turned on the shark shield, and then I just swam away from the boat. They came over, they swam underneath me a couple times, but they never got within 20, 30 feet of me. So, you know, they didn't come up and, you know, close to investigate or anything. And then once they kind of left the area, I swam back over to the boat and I asked who was going to continue to spearfish. And of course there were no takers.
With the shark shield, do you tie it around your ankle and run it down one side of your fin channels?
I just let it hang off my ankle.
Okay.
So I wear carbon fiber fins, and carbon fiber is a wonderful conductor.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll get a minor shock from time to time if you get to kicking
so annoying.
Yeah. So
I used to dive with a mate, and he had it, and every time I'd swim behind him, I'd get it, and it's just, you're in this zen freediving state on the surface, and then all of a sudden you get buzzed. It's not pleasant, even though it's a very small current. I hate electricity. So
I know. Oh, I do too. Yeah, it drives me nuts. Yeah. So my favorite thing is most of the guys I dive with, we've either got aluminum ladders or we've got an aluminum bracket that the engine sits on, and we hoist ourselves out of the water on it. So I'm sitting on the transom. I've got my feet hanging over the side, and my shark shield is sitting there laying on the engine bracket. One of my dive buddies invariably will swim up, grab a hold of it, hoist himself up, and he's like, "Why am I getting shocked?" Sorry. Oops.
I'm really sorry.
I feel bad.
Yeah. What boats are you guys diving off there a lot? Make some models if you like, sizes, all the rest of it.
I think kind of the perfect boat for the Florida Keys is like a 25-foot center console or even a 25-foot cabin boat. Something that's set up for fishing is probably best because you're going to get blood all over the inside of the boat when you're tossing fish in it. But for the most part, like one of the guys has got a Parker. I've got a boat that's called a Downeaster. My boat was made in 1996, I think. And I rebuilt it about 5-6 years ago. But yeah, for the most part, people are running center consoles. Anything over 30 feet is pretty big. You're sucking more gas. It costs a little bit more to run. So like my boat, I've got a single 200 horse engine on it, and the boat's 25 feet long and it's got a 10-foot beam. So it's big and roomy. But I don't need a lot of power. I don't need to go 50 miles an hour to go out to the reef. I'm fine chugging out there at 25 miles an hour or 25 knots and dropping my divers in the water. So
and how long are you motoring out for from where you are?
So in our area, we've got some funky regs because everybody hates spearfishermen. We have to go out 3 miles and fish in federal waters in my immediate area. If you go 10 miles down the Keys, you can spearfish from shore.
Okay.
So if you're further north of us, about 10 miles north of us, you have to be in 600 feet of water.
Oh, wow.
Or maybe it's 300 feet, but you've got to be like, I don't know, 8 miles offshore or some baloney like that.
That's terrible.
Oh, yeah. What it does is it puts an enormous amount of pressure on the periphery of that area.
Yeah.
Because people, they run out of that area and they go a mile, 2 miles past the boundary, and then they shoot the crap out of everything that's there.
We're going to hook more into Florida Keys and the Veterans Vault today. I wanted to sort of go back and maybe get a really memorable fish for you, like the stork, the species.
Sure. Okay. I got a couple. One of the ones that I'm happiest with. It wasn't a particularly prestigious fish. It was like a 25-inch mangrove snapper, which I think is pretty similar to your mangrove jack.
Yep.
They're very similar. It's a proper snapper species. They can be fairly wary, particularly when they get big. But this one was all by itself. And when I dive, I tend to look for structure. And I think I was in 15 meters of water.
Okay.
And I saw what I thought might be some good-looking structure down there. So I dropped down and I looked at it. And I saw a couple of fish. And I had no intention of shooting anything on this particular dive. And as I looked toward there was a little ledge, and I saw this tail poking up on the other side of the ledge, and I thought, damn, that's a big snapper. So I kind of swam over a little bit closer to get a good look at it. And first I thought it was a mutton snapper, but then I realized it was a big mangrove, and it was, for us, that size mangrove snapper is pretty big. So I was excited about it, but I didn't want to rush the shot. And so I backed away from the ledge and, came back up to the surface, did my breathe up, dropped back down. I'm sitting there and I'm looking for that damn fish and I can't find him anywhere. But there he is. He had actually moved down about 10 feet and he was behind some sea rod and I just couldn't see him. And all of a sudden I see him. He has no clue I'm even there because, I've got perfect setup. He cannot see me. So I kind of lean around the side of that sea rod and pop him and rolled him right over. And it was one of those moments where I set the stock up properly. I handled everything right. I was patient and everything came through. And I wound up putting a real nice fish in the boat. And
yeah, awesome.
Yeah, a good sized mangrove snapper is 20 to 22 inches. And a 25 incher, it's not newspaper worthy, but it's a pretty fish. So
the stoke factor was high. Yeah, they look a little bit like mangrove jacks, I guess, and sort of similar to a cubera.
Yes, yeah. If you guys have cubera, that's very, very similar.
No, we don't have cubera here either, but it's just kind of how I associate them all. So, yeah, you guys have got some intriguing species over there. I want to dig into that in the Veteran's Vault. What's your favourite species to hunt, and how do you hunt them effectively?
Ooh, well, let's see. Mangrove and mutton snapper are kind of my favorites. Mangrove snapper tend to hang around in groups. Might be 3-4 fish. Every now and then they're solitary, but usually 3-4 fish up to several dozen. And then with mutton snapper, they tend to be pretty solitary. And muttons are very smart fish. They're fast swimmers. They're incredibly strong. You get two kinds of hunts. You'll drop down to the bottom and you'll throw up some sand, and the mutton snapper will swim right into the end of your spear gun and you kill him. Okay. And then the other kind of mangrove snapper, you see him from the surface, you chase him 100 yards, he goes into a rock, you drop down, and he darts out the other side. Some of them are just incredibly spooky. And muttons or mangrove snapper can be difficult to hunt because when the school gets nervous, then the game is on. It's really hard to get close to them. Mm-hmm. So then it becomes an issue of trying to put structure between you and them, or chumming them in, or sometimes I'll use other species of fish. I'll put those fish between me and the mangroves. Yeah. And when the other fish come over and look at me, the mangroves will like, hey, what's he looking at? And they come swimming over. So, sometimes you got to use their curiosity against them.
Yeah. You've identified like half a dozen techniques there that are pretty popular sort of in different spots for hunting reef fish particularly. So I love hiding in a school of something else and hope that, due to that school sort of, when they're not afraid of you, it makes the other species come in a little bit. It's a great technique. Cool. Toughest situation. I mean, we've chatted a bit about sharks and stuff. What's something that scared the crap out of you, and, so what did you take away from it?
The first one, I went off the back of the boat one day. I was scuba diving. I was an instructor at the time, and we were doing a wreck dive. And I was on the end of the group to make sure that divers didn't get separated. And when I went off the back of the boat, being the smart ass that I am, I did a somersault. And everybody else is in the water. The customers didn't see it. No big deal. When I did it, I knocked the purge valve out of my regulator. I didn't knock it out. That's I folded it over, and with the force of the water, and my regulator flooded.
Free flow or
no, it didn't. The regulator flooded with water.
Oh, yeah.
So I go to take a breath, and all that water goes into my mouth, hits my larynx, and my larynx slams shut.
Yeah.
Total laryngeospasm, and I've had it happen a couple of times. But this was by far the worst. I sat there, and the first thing I did was I panicked. I was like, I'm totally screwed. I can't breathe. I threw my regulator off. I'm sitting there rejecting my gear. I lifted my mask up so I could try to breathe through my nose, which I'm doing everything wrong. And I know that. So I thought to myself, what should I do? And I couldn't utter a word. I mean, no air was going in, none was coming out. So you can't talk. The captain has already turned and is walking away. He's walking back up toward the center of the boat. So there's nobody there to help me. So I realized it, and I calmed myself down, and I thought to myself, what does my training say to do? And I just relied on my training. You put your regulator in your mouth, and after about, probably 20 seconds, I was able to squeak some air in. And, 30 seconds later, I was able to, breathe fairly normally. And at about the 3-minute mark, I headed on down and go dive the wreck. So
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, that first 10 seconds was just pure panic.
That made me think of that famous old quote, and I quickly typed it in. We don't rise to the level of our expectations, we fall to the level of our training. So obviously you defaulted eventually when you got over the panic to that baseline of training that you had. Do you encourage people to take a similar mindset with freediving? Do you recommend they go and do a course?
Absolutely. I'm a freedive instructor, and I've had a lot of days out on the water watching things go well, and some days where they don't go well. And I've gotten to dive with, I get people that walk in the shop and they're like, hey, I got a 30-foot boat and we're going to go today and it's flat calm. Do you want to go? Sure, why not? So I don't even know these people and I'm going out on the water with them. You've got to be very, very careful about, how you're diving out there. But I encourage everybody to take a freedive course. The safety alone is priceless. And if you get a good instructor that teaches you things like what you're really doing during a breathe up, it's not so much that you're oxygenating your blood. What you're doing is you're relaxing.
Yeah. Everyone thinks there's just this elaborate breathing. But I was chatting with Adam Stern the other day, and he was saying they've just gone all the way back to tidal breathing, which is, more or less just getting your body into a really relaxed state before you take your final breath and descend. And it's funny how the school of thought has changed. I think I remember all the way back in one of the very first interviews we did, like Simon Tripp talking about learning about levels of relaxation. And I just think there's just, you reach another level of understanding with how important relaxation is. And it's everything with freediving.
It's crazy. So one of the tips that I learned, and I learned it from Anvar Mufazalov,
Anvar Mufazalov. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'd like to buy a vowel. So he is amazing, and I really admire the way that he dives. And I've listened to a couple of interviews with him, and him talking about becoming a jellyfish was like the one thing. Well, it's one of two things that really stuck with me. The other was he was talking about how when he dives, you look at somebody's legs when they're laying on the bottom, and if they're curled up, our natural body position is for our legs to be up so that we can kind of maintain our balance. Well, why don't you set your fins down and just relax your legs? So what I do when I go out and I'm getting warmed up is I drop down to the bottom and I lay my legs down, and then I lay there for 10 seconds. Have you ever tried that?
That's a good little micro goal. I think at times in my spearfishing, when I haven't got that scarcity mindset, that we're all victim to, I haven't been spearfishing for a month. I've just got to get out there and shoot a fish. When you can kind of escape that sort of little mental trap, I have done things like that, but only probably on my best behaved days.
Yeah. See, I do it. It's part of my warm up when I go out and I do it. It's like when you do a freedive course. I always tell everybody, when you're doing your pull downs, when you stop, you want to orient yourself so that you're right side up, but you're horizontal. Put your legs straight out behind you, and then try to relax them.
Yeah, nice.
And if they do that, 9 times out of 10, their breath hold goes from 30 seconds to a minute. Just boom. Yeah. It's amazing. And what it is that they just relaxed. They don't realize that's what they've done, but that's what they've done. So cool. Yeah, I think it's really, for me, that was one of the things that he talked about doing, and that and the whole, be a jellyfish thing. I was like, when I'm out there, I try to be as limp and, be that wet noodle.
Yeah, he's a mad dude. He's got a spearfishing, there's a deep spearfishing encyclopedia, I think, is his YouTube channel. He's fantastic. Had him on the show in the early days. He's a really interesting dude. So, yeah, good takeaways from Anvar. We interrupt this Noob Spearo podcast to bring you a public service announcement. These shows are often explicit and filled with ridiculous levels of stoke, and actionable info. For more stoke, head over to noobspiro.com/morestoke and join the Floater newsletter, an intermittent publication overflowing with spearfishing goodness. That's noobspiro.com/morestoke. You're welcome. Hey guys, today's podcast is brought to you by freedivingsafety.com. It's powered by Ted Hardy from Immersion Freediving. He won an award and he decided to create something that could help the whole world, every single person wanting to get into freedive spearfishing. There's a whole bunch of foundational principles and knowledge that you can learn at freedivingsafety.com. It'll help you to catch more fish and have more fun, believe it or not. It's not just a safety course. This is practical information in there for helping you to not only manage the risk, but to have more fun and look after your mates and yourself. Check it out, freedivingsafety.com. Let's hook into Veterans Vault. Let's get into spearfishing in the Florida Keys, if that's okay.
Sure.
So let's establish some basics. I guess, so you're in the Florida Keys. It sounds like the northern half of the Florida Keys, you actually need a boat.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
Okay. And then the southern half you don't. You can shore dive.
You can. It's tough.
Okay.
And I'll explain why in a sec. But yeah, for the northern part, you definitely need a boat. And we're in an area called Monroe County. So Monroe County has got a spearfishing flyer. I'm trying to read what it says on the wall. I think it's Monroe County Spearfishing Regulations or something like that. You can call the shop and I'll give you the link to it. Okay. In fact, what I'll try to do is remind me, and I'll send it.
I'll put it in today's show notes. So if we go to noobspiro.com/ed, ED, I'll link up anything we chat about today, including Killshot spearguns.
Perfect. Yeah. So it pays to read that. We have FWC down here, which is Florida Wildlife Commission. Those guys don't screw around when it comes to passing out tickets. Now, I know all those guys. They're really nice guys. In fact, half of them live in my condo complex. And every time I see them, I always tell them the same thing. Yeah, guys, I'm going out and I'm shooting small fish today. But it's funny when
you're a shit stirrer.
When they board the boat, they all they want to do is look in the cooler because they want to see what we shot.
Yeah, yeah.
They know that we're not out there poaching, but they don't have a lot of sympathy for people that are taking fish out of season or that are taking short fish. So you need to know your species and you need to know the regs. So the way it works is basically from Key Largo to Molasses Reef, you've got to be out like 600 feet or something like that. From Key Largo south to the south end of Long Key, you have to be out 3 miles, and there's no fishing in the backcountry or in Florida Bay in that area. Okay. Once you're south of Long Key, you can spearfish on either side of the road. But some of the best places to spearfish are in these deeper channels near the bridges. But most bridges are, you either are dealing with extreme currents of 2 to 5 knots, and you can't swim against 2 knots, and 5 knots, you may as well just wave bye-bye. You'll be in Cuba before long. The other thing you got to watch out for is the boats in those passes. The boats, some people pay attention to what's going on in front of them, and there's a whole bunch of people that don't.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And the one I don't worry about being bitten by a shark or stung by a stingray. I worry about getting run over by a boat. So, that's kind of my boogeyman out there. But
that's fair.
Yeah, but there are some places that you can go. Now, as far as the water goes, you're going to be in about 2 meters of water at the most right offshore. Okay. And it's going to stay 2 meters until you're probably 1,000 yards offshore, and then it'll slowly drop off. So, but the reef begins about 4 to 5 miles out, and it comes up to about 25 feet. Let's say 7 meters, 8 meters. It will slowly drop off over the next half mile to about 65 feet, and then it drops almost straight. It drops off at about a 45-degree angle down to about 100.
So boats are more or less mandatory.
Yeah, for the main reef. Now there can be some good spearfishing near some of the mangroves, but you can south of Long Key. a kayak can get you out there. So can a paddleboard.
Okay.
Because there are some channels near some of the islands that will hold mangrove snapper and muttons and even groupers certain times of the year.
Okay, cool. All right. So we get out to the reef. What are some of the other species we're encountering out there? What are the sort of maybe the three everyone starts on?
Everybody looks for hogfish.
Yeah.
Hogfish, they're delicious eating, and they're probably the dumbest fish on the planet.
They look radical. I love the look of them. Like sitting over here in Aussie, I look at the hogfish pics and I'm just like, I want one.
Yeah. What you guys have got a fish. I see people shooting it over in New Zealand. It's got that downward snout too, and I can't remember what it is all of a sudden.
Oh, the boarfish?
Yes, boarfish.
Mm-hmm.
So now I don't know how boarfish behave, but these things are ridiculous.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So you've got hogfish. Grouper are really big on everybody's menu around here on the reef, and we've got black grouper and red grouper that you're allowed to shoot. The reds might get up to as much as maybe 15 pounds,
okay.
But the black grouper can get up over 100.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they get quite huge. We took two this year that were just over 40 pounds. 20, what is that? Not 20, but probably 17, 18 kilos.
Yep.
So, they were big fish. And now the thing with these fish is as soon as you shoot them, if you don't stone them, they are looking for a place to hide. So I tell people all the time that when I hunt grouper in 60 feet of water or less. There's a couple places where we'll go out and we'll try to shoot them in 80 and 90. We always have a scuba tank on board because if that fish gets rocked up, I'm not going to do 10 dives to 90 feet trying to drag him out of the reef because I'm going to black out.
Straining when you're down deep is never a good idea. Obviously, oxygen consumption, but the other thing is lung squeeze and all the rest of it.
Very true.
Get yourself in trouble down there.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that happens is oftentimes you'll have sharks that'll come in and, even if you claim not to be affected by that, they make your heart rate go up.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Especially when you're down deep and alone and there's a fish wriggling around somewhere that the shark wants to eat.
Yeah. Now, something I've done before, we had a mangrove, or not a mangrove, a grouper that got stuck in a hole, and we were having a hell of a time getting him out. And we had a bull shark that kept swimming in. And what we were really afraid of is that when we had our back to him, he might come up and take a nibble on somebody. So I took the shark shield and I dropped it down the reel line, and it wound up right there on the shaft.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so we just left it laying there in the sand, and that shark stayed 30, 40 feet away, and then finally he gave up and he just left.
Oh, nice.
But it kept him away. So those shark shields can pay off.
So we've got hogfish and groper. I mean, the other thing with groper is, they hole up, but the other thing is they're pretty slow growing. Are they quite in good numbers there, though?
So I don't shoot very many black grouper at all. I myself only took one this year, but I know a lot about their growth rate. And I think that we're taking them when they're too small. Yeah. And of course, I'm going to say something crazy that's backed up by science too. So a grouper tends to be about 12 years old and 26 inches when it reproduces, and we're allowed to take 24-inch black grouper. So we're taking fish before they reproduce. Now, here's the really crazy thing. They're all females. They don't become male until they're like, I don't remember, 18 years and like 40 pounds or something like that.
Oh, wow.
So these, and they don't all become male when they get that big. Yeah. So when we're taking these 40, 50, 60 pound fish, they're a whole lot of fun to shoot. They're, but we're removing something from the ecosystem that is going to take 18 to 20 years
to replace. Yeah.
And consequently, I shoot a lot of snapper, and I shoot snapper, jacks, and triggerfish like they're going out of style. But, snapper, a mature mangrove snapper that's, say, 20, 22 inches, that thing's less than 3 years old. So,
yeah, right.
Yeah. So it's, they grow a lot faster. And then if, during certain times of year, we go after wahoo primarily in the winter. And I think a 50-pound wahoo is like less than 2 years old.
Yeah. This is one thing people don't realize. It's like, the greenies get on and slam people on Instagram for holding up these big trophy pelagic fish, but some of those things are the fastest growing and reproducing fish in the ocean, and it's some of the reef species that we've got to be a little bit more careful about. Particularly, I think groper. I think they're a little bit vulnerable. They're a fish with a lot of character too, and
they are.
They are a rad fish, and I get it. I love shooting them too, but I think it's just a little bit of self-management with how much we shoot and how often we shoot them is kind of necessary.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm not a tree hugger, but I see the environment, and I know what happens when you don't take care of it. And we need to do a good job of taking care of our fisheries. And I don't care where you live in the world, you get involved. I used to do a lot of fisheries research for one of the organizations here locally, and was really quite involved in it. And as a result, I learned an enormous amount about the ecosystem and the fish in it. And I think I've got a very great appreciation for it. And one of the things that really disappoints me is when you get somebody that is an educator or a scientist, and so I was at DEMA a few weeks ago, and this lady said to me, "Oh, I don't like spearfishermen." Hello, how are you?
Yeah.
That was basically how we were introduced. The guy introducing us. I was wearing a Killshot speargun shirt. And she said, "Oh, I just don't like spearfishermen," and I found out that she does fisheries research over in the Bahamas. And I encouraged her, instead of coming out of the gate with "I don't like spearfishermen," why don't you talk to them about what kind of fish it is and species that they like to go after, and then maybe educate them a little bit.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And that's, if more people would share their knowledge instead of, being offended, I think we'd all get along a little bit better.
Oh, yeah. Just antagonism from the start. So it's one way to not influence people. And
exactly.
Regardless of your political or religious views, you should be able to have a rational discussion. And one thing I like about Joe Rogan podcast is he talks to everyone. And, he just encourages people to just we share 95% of stuff in common with people. Find the commonalities and just discuss the differences. There's no need to be such a dickhead about stuff, No,
I completely agree.
But people get passionate about topics, and then all of a sudden, their topic sort of, overrides their sort of their sense of empathy and understanding for everyone else. And I get it, but she could influence a lot of spearfishermen by just having a five-minute conversation about stuff. So yeah, it's a good point. Hey, so we did hogfish. We talked about groper. Jack Crevalle, is that a species you target?
Not a chance. Not unless I want fertilizer.
Yeah. So you don't like eating them? They're no good?
No, I won't eat Jack Crevalle. We do have some great jacks here, though. We have something called a Yellowjack that is pretty good. They're pretty plentiful on the reef. They're on the reef and they're out further. You've also got Amberjack. Let's see, Amberjack, banded rudderfish, lesser Amberjack, and Almaco Jack are the four Amberjack relatives. Okay. Triggerfish are absolutely delicious. They can be kind of tough to skin, but there's a couple of tricks. If you put the knife in right next to the trigger, that's a soft spot. And then you work the knife around in a big circle, and then you literally grab it by, do you grab it by the front or the tail? I can't remember. But you grab the skin, and you literally just peel the skin right off.
Yep.
And then you separate it from the bones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Might have to see if I can find a Google video for that. That sounds cool.
Yeah, one of these days I'll actually shoot one because cleaning them, if you don't do it right, they'll ruin your knife. So
yeah, right.
But if you go in right on that fin that sticks up, that's where you want to go in at, and you just kind of work around, and they come apart pretty easy.
So we had Triggerfish, Almaco Jacks, Amberjacks. What was the other one you mentioned?
Almaco Jacks. Oh, Yellowjacks.
Yellowjacks. What do they look like?
Well, they look kind of like an Amberjack, but they don't have any of the markings on them.
Okay.
They're kind of a pale silvery yellow color typically.
Okay.
And they have a yellow tail.
Oh, yeah, I know what they look like now. Yeah, yep. I'm with you. I just Googled it. I might stick one in the comments as well. Yeah, okay. And they eat all right?
They do. The one thing with them is that they don't have a lot of fat in their meat, and you need to get the bloodline out. But you cut the bloodline out and do it. Be careful with it. Do a good job, but try not to waste any meat. Do not overcook the fish. And if you guys leave with nothing else, do not overcook your damn fish. With Yellowjack, because they have very little fat, they dry out really fast.
Okay.
So, be gentle with them when you cook them. And then I'm one of these guys, I don't know, maybe I'm a weirdo. I will poke anything. Find a tuna poke recipe, and I will chop up anything and put it in a poke sauce and eat it.
Okay. What's your go-to? How do you make a poke?
Let's see. I use about a tablespoon of soy sauce, tablespoon of ponzu sauce, teaspoon of honey, maybe a little bit more honey. I like it sweet. And about an equal amount of rice wine vinegar.
Okay.
So a tablespoon of rice wine vinegar. And then I mince garlic and ginger. And then we chop up some green onions and chuck it in a bowl. If I've got cilantro or parsley or something like that, I'll throw that in too. But mix it up with the fish. A lot of times I'll take that out on the boat with us, and the first fish I see in the morning becomes breakfast.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and oftentimes it's a jack, and they're not jacks that I would normally eat, but because they're raw, they taste just fine. So
do you chill the fish back for like 5 minutes or something before you do that, or you just chop it straight up and put it in?
Yeah, usually what I do is you mean if we take one first thing in the morning?
Yeah, will you ice it just to sort of set the flesh? No? Okay.
Well, sometimes if somebody's on the boat, we'll have them chuck it in the cooler, and then usually I'll prepare it when I come up. Now here's the trick: it can't be a regulated species, because you're not allowed to do that with a regulated species. So it's got to be some kind of species that there's no take limit on.
Okay.
So now one of the things I've done, and I don't know how legal it is, but I have one time I filleted a mackerel, and we ate about half of it on the boat that day, and I left it, basically the rest of it, the carcass, in the cooler. So the FWC boards the boat, they can still measure the fish, they can identify what it is because it's got a head and a tail and half of its skin.
Yep.
But I don't know if that's completely legal.
It sounds like you're trying to be legal, and you've got to hope that the fisheries officers would honour that.
Yeah, I would hope so, but I'm not telling you to do it.
Yeah. All right. So we've covered sort of a couple of species. I want to move into sort of some locations to go. You've covered broad spectrum, some areas. If new guys come into your shop or new ladies come into your shop, where do you point them?
What I try to do is find out what kind of diver they are. In the Florida Keys, you can scuba dive and spearfish too. So if you're a scuba spearfisherman, going out there, find some spot that's legal and knock yourself out. If you're a free diver, you've got to find the right depth to dive, because you don't want to be diving in 60 feet if you're a 20-foot free diver. But oftentimes I'll point people to the patch reefs that they're in 18 to 30 feet. So anywhere from 5 meters to like 10 meters of water. Oftentimes you'll find big schools of fish on them, but you won't find big fish on them.
Okay.
But you can go out and fill up your cooler with mangrove snapper, or catch your limit at one patch reef sometimes. That
sounds ideal for people, sort of in the early days.
Oh yeah. Well, and I encourage people too to shoot things like grunts. We have a species of fish called a grunt, which is similar to a snapper. They have nice white meat, and there's several species that get big enough to consume, and they're plentiful. In most cases, there's no limit to the darn things. So they're great if you're trying to break in a spear gun and learn how to use it, or you want to take the kids out, because they can usually get close enough to them to take them, even with a pole spear. Now, if you're up to diving anywhere from 10 to 20 meters, the main reef is the place to be. And what I tell people to do, there's a couple different reefs around here. So like we've got one reef here called Crocker Reef, and it's well marked, lots of markers, and oftentimes on any given day there'll be 10 boats sitting out there on the edge of Crocker. Those guys are usually in 70 to 100 feet. They're chumming the edge of the reef, and they've kind of got a lock on it. So you don't want to go dive there. You want to come inshore of that, dive 100, 150, 200 yards away from those boats at a minimum. Probably go down the reef a little ways. It's our reef here, I think, is 164 miles long. So go find someplace else rather than the back of somebody's boat to go fish. But get in and start kind of working it. And what we do different things. We sometimes get drugged behind the boat on a line till we see a school of fish, and then we'll stop. Sometimes, like if I'm out, if I see structure that looks attractive, I stop and dive it.
Yeah.
So I do have some specific spots that I go to that I've learned over the years tend to hold fish, but usually I use that as more of an area thing. I go to that spot, I look at the direction the tide or the current is moving, and I drop in above it, and I start 300 yards away from it, then over top of it, and then 300 yards past it. So I'm covering a lot of ground.
Yeah. And it sort of spreads out, your fishing impact, but it also gives you more opportunity to potentially see more as well. So that's pretty cool.
We've got a spot that I call Jurassic Park, and it's in 30 feet of water. It is a couple of cleaning stations that hold just some massive fish. Okay. And we will go out there from time to time, and we'll go shoot if somebody just absolutely has to have a grouper for some reason, we'll go there and we'll take one. But the rule is, and whenever I take anybody there, I got a couple of simple rules. We're allowed to take one fish, but we're not allowed to take the biggest fish.
Nice.
Big fish recruit big fish. So if you take that 50-pound fish, we're going to wind up with a bunch of 20-pound fish there. So and maybe smaller. And if you overshoot the area, they're just not going to come back. They're not stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I think grouper in particular, like that, they commune up, and if you find one of those spots, it can be temptation to want to overfish them. So that's good.
Yeah.
All right. So we've talked about locations. We've covered off species and sort of the broad sort of geographical area. What about like clubs and maybe freediving instructors in the area? So you yourself are an instructor. How often do you run courses?
This time of year, I tend to run them kind of on demand because the current is so bad. But like I've got one guy that we're working with him on Tuesdays. Yep. And then I've got some guys that are the military parachute club, the professional parachute guys in the military. I got a bunch of them that are getting started here in a couple of weeks. Sure. And so for them, they're only able to go on Sunday. So we'll break it up and do them in different groups over different Sundays. So I try to get out there and do it as much as I can. And for me, I don't care what I'm doing. As long as I'm in the water, my face is buried, I'm happy. So and you see some cool stuff come up to that line sometime too.
What is there a club in your area?
There is. And by the way, going back to freedive instructors, there's another guy down the road, Formula Freediving down in Marathon. He does a fair bit of training as well. Okay. So, there's some options.
It speaks highly of you that you would even mention your potential competitors. But I think, like freediving and spearfishing, we don't have to, treat everyone like they're your competition. So it's a good thing. What about the club?
Clubs are tough, man. I tried to start a club last year, and actually 2 years ago, and it kind of limped along. Now, I think part of it was timing. We had the hurricane a few months before, and I just think everybody had different things on their mind. We've got roughly 25 people that are in the Facebook group, and for the most part, it's kind of a dive buddy finder. And to be honest with you, if that's all it does, that's absolutely fine as far as I'm concerned. Because the most important thing is that when you go out there, you have somebody to go with. So many things can happen when you dive alone. And I listened to your podcast just recently about diving alone, and as a freedive instructor, of course, I'd never ever dive alone. But as a spear fisherman, I used to go all the time. There are things that I do, that aren't dispersed. So
it was a big conversation to have, but it was time to have it. And I think like when you address it in a sort of a transparent way, like we tried to do anyway. You know, it allows people to think freely about it, and because a lot of guys, you know, they don't listen at all, and so at least if you have the conversation, they realize, you know, what it's about.
Yeah. So and so the way, I don't know, I'm sure I'm going to get some criticism for saying this, but the way I address it is that if I'm diving by myself, I'm diving by myself. If I'm diving with other people, I'm diving with other people. And I like them to be at the surface when I come up.
Yep.
I like them to watch that fish go out the back door and begin to follow it as I'm making my ascent. You know, it's one of those things where as a group, we put more fish into the box. And I won't dive with guys that wind up 200 yards away from me. I just will not. I won't tolerate it. It's not safe. I'm relying on them to be there. If I'm out there on a day when we've got a 20-knot wind and we got 3 foot waves, and we're diving 15 to 20 meters, I want somebody up there on the surface. Yeah,
for sure. It's understanding that risk properly and you know, and dealing with it appropriately. And the only safety mechanism you have when you're out there is your dive buddy. So 100% get what you're saying. Let's wrap up Veterans Vault. Anything else for diving the Florida Keys? Is there any good resources or anything else? We mentioned the fisheries guide that hopefully I'll be able to link to in the interview. Was there any other resources for guys wanting to start spearfishing locally in the Keys area?
Well, they can certainly call the shop, and I'll try to get some stuff out on the website as well. I can't really think of anything as far as resources go. A couple of things as far as exposure protection. If you come December, January, and February, we are plagued with Portuguese man-of-war.
Okay.
Sometimes we get a couple. Couple of weeks ago, we literally had to move because they were everywhere. So exposure protection is an absolute must in those conditions. As far as the temperature of the water, the temperature ranges between 70 degrees in the dead of winter up to about 90 degrees middle of summer. In the shallow water, it can actually get quite a bit warmer. It can get into the high 90s sometimes. And the shallow water really heats up. And for those of you that are blessed with the metric system, you know, we're talking about between 21 and 32 degrees. And the way I tend to rate the seasons is I have 3 millimeter season and I have 1 millimeter season. So, and I wear a 1 millimeter in the summer. Sometimes I'll wear a rash guard, but most of the time I wear a 1. And I'll wear, you can get running pants, you know, the Lycra running pants.
Yeah.
Those are excellent in the summer. You know, they're form-fitting, they don't create a lot of drag, and they keep the sun off of you. And if you happen to have a jellyfish or a man-of-war or something like that touch you, it's not getting through that Lycra.
The other thing I like about those Lycra pants is you can go straight from the water to riding a bicycle to the coffee shop where you can have a cappuccino, and no one will even sneer at you.
That's what a Speedo's for.
You're up with your Aussie slang. It's great. Funniest thing. What's one of the funniest things you've seen out in the water?
I'm going to go way, way, way back. Okay, so I mentioned that I was given this crappy Voight spear gun when I was a kid. So a few months ago, a friend of mine on Facebook and guy I went to high school with, when he found out I had started a spear gun company, he reminded me of something that happened. So we're out behind my house. I've just gotten a spear gun, and we've loaded it, and he's holding it up, and he kind of got his elbow cocked, and he's kind of holding it up with both hands, and he pulls the trigger, and the spear gun goes right back into his eye. It turned him into a pirate. I was pretty pissed because it broke the lanyard and the damn shaft went out about 20, 30 yards out into the river. And, you know, the river's 25 feet deep and full of mud. Yeah. And So I spent the next 2 days trying to find that shaft. But meanwhile, Jack had a puffy eye. So,
you've used firearms, but do you know the Weatherby eyebrow?
oh yeah,
We don't really have that saying in spearfishing, but it's similar, isn't it?
yeah, that's exactly. Well, that's something like whenever I get somebody that I'm teaching to spearfish, I always tell them, lock that arm. Otherwise you're gonna have a hell of a headache.
Everyone does it though, at least once. It's just like, it's a rite of passage, just like smashing a scope into your eye with a rifle. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So
I've got a code brown that I got to discuss.
Oh, another code brown. It's mandatory. We should probably change the name to the Shit Podcast. There's just that much. There's that many poo stories.
So we actually have a place where we used to hunt lobster. Well, we still hunt lobster, and it's called the Shithole. You can imagine why.
Yeah.
So one day I'm out on the boat, and we were actually fishing. We weren't spearfishing, but this made me laugh. I laughed hysterically for about 30 minutes. I'm on the boat and I've got to go. So I drop my drawers and I hang my butt over the side, and I'm holding on to the center console, and we're in a little bay boat, and my dad's in the boat with me, and he's on the other side. He's like doing his best not to deal with this. And of course, everybody knows that you don't pee down or pee uphill. You don't poo uphill either. So I got downwind. I was polite. I got downwind and I took a dump. We were fishing with this bright yellow drift anchor.
Yeah.
And it was right above or right below where my dad's standing. And all of a sudden these turds start going into the drift anchor. And he starts gagging. So bad that I fell over and I got run over by the boat. The boat's just drifting. The boat rolled me over, and I'm only in about 4 feet of water. And of course, where do I end up? In the goddamn drift anchor.
I'm still trying to get over why every poo floats. Like, what's up with that? Like, why can't they sink? It'd be much better and easier to hide.
Oh my God! Yeah, it's. I don't have an answer for that, Shrek. I really don't.
It's the funniest thing too about this podcast too, because every single Spearo's got awkward poo stories in the ocean, so it's fantastic. Upgrading to composite or carbon fiber spearfishing fins is a huge step in your spearfishing journey, and you want to make a smart investment. So I'm going to suggest investing your moolah in penetrator fins. These fins have got a long-lasting performance. They've got a warranty that outperforms anything else in the industry. Check them out at penetratorfins.com. Their before and after sales service is absolutely phenomenal. These fins are being worn by champions all over the world. Check them out at penetratorfins.com. For a limited time only, use the code NoobSpearo to save $25 on any purchase of composite or carbon fiber fins. Check them out, penetratorfins.com. Spearing Magazine, possibly the world's best spearfishing publication. It's a spearing mag for Spearos by Spearos. Part of the reason I like Spearing Magazine so much is because there's crazy stories from Spearos just like you, from all around the world. And it's what makes Spearing Magazine such a special publication. If you go to spearingmagazine.com, check out the article submissions page. There's a full guide to how to submit an article, but I would encourage you to do so because I want to read about your adventures and inspire everyone else to take on their next spearfishing adventure. That's at spearingmagazine.com. What about your dive bag? I bet you've got a Killshot speargun in there.
I always have at least 3.
3?
Oh yeah. Well, I'm shameless, so I'm always trying to put them into people's hands.
Yeah, that sounds fair enough.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things that some people bring extra shafts on a day. I usually bring 2 or 3 guns. So a few years ago, I got out and I shot a fish, and it bent my shaft. We hadn't been in the water 10 minutes, I get back in the boat, get back in the water. I got my second gun. I pop another fish, and he immediately goes in a rock, bends my shaft. At this point, 25 minutes has elapsed. So I come up, and as I'm getting into the boat, I asked my buddy if I can borrow a spear gun. I got to drive the boat.
One thing, like you guys are out in 25, 30-foot boats, so you've got plenty of room, but sometimes the boats we use here, like sometimes it's kind of the smaller the better. There's this sweet spot. It's like 17, 18 foot. We love boats like that because they're economical. They can go offshore, but the problem is you get 4 blokes on it or you know, what, 4 spearos or spearers, and if everyone's got 3 or 4 spear guns each, there's nowhere for them to bloody go.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. And I'm really careful about that. I always ask people before I get on the boat, and this is part of etiquette. I always ask them about gear storage and about, you know, I'll tell them, hey, do you mind if I bring a couple of spear guns? You know, because I usually bring a 40 and a 55. Sometimes I'll bring 2 55s with me. Sometimes I'll throw in something different, you know, because I've got a new gun that I want to try out. But I always ask, because if they're not set up for it, or it's going to be a big mess, or, we're going to have 6 people in the damn boat. Well, God, you got a dozen spear guns sitting back there. Yeah, it can set people off.
So you carry 3 spear guns out with you. What about the rest of your dive bag?
Yeah, so typically I've got 3. I have 50-meter reels on most of the guns. I always take a Neptunic. Well, I've got several different floats that I use. I've got a Neptonics float that I've been using lately, and I've got a 100-foot float line, and I've got a 75-foot float line.
Okay.
And so for you guys that are new, if you have a 50-foot float line and you dive to 45 feet, you're not going to be able to hit a damn thing, because the float is going to be yanking on the gun the entire time. So what I like to do is get a float that is a float line that's about a third longer than what I'm going to be diving. That way I've got a little bit of slack in it. So I've got a 100 and a 75. It depends on where we're going and who I'm going with that day, but usually I'll take one of those 2.
Are you using a rigid buoy or an inflatable?
No, it's an inflatable.
Okay.
That's nice because it can fold down, and this is it's not like a 3 atmosphere or anything like that.
Yeah.
You know, it's orally inflated, so it folds right down, and I can blow it right up.
And float line material, do you like the PVC stuff that everyone's using, or do you prefer like a hard line type thing?
No, I've got the PVC float lines. I've got one. It's 11 years old, and it's ugly and it looks like crap, but I can't throw it away because it still works. It doesn't leak.
Yeah.
You know, so everybody says, oh, those vinyl ones, they'll, you know, sooner or later they're gonna crap out. Well, I'm still waiting.
I had a hard plastic coated one that's sealed on the inside with a hard line on the inside, and that thing was bloody awesome, but I got wrapped. I shot something it holed up and wrapped around a rock and current one day and punctured it, and then it was just shit after that. That was the end of it, and it's quite an expensive exercise. So I know you can repair them, but so the PVC is kind of the next sort of upgrade, but they're bloody expensive.
Yeah, they are. I me's they're about $100. You know, so they're not cheap. This one's got a 1,800-pound Dyneema in it or something like that. You know, so it's really sturdy. But during lobster season, we'll find lobster underneath of a rock, and we'll go down and we'll tie it to that rock, and then we'll pull down on it. And this is the crappy yellow one that I have. I just can't seem to. I don't know. Sooner or later, we'll run it over with the boat. I'll get a new one. So I've got a Scuba Max mask that I've been diving, and their masks are really soft. I like them. I've got a CX wide bore snorkel and get great air, and it's a simple J snorkel. I can't be bothered with a purge valve. I use a Marseille style belt. I like being able to cinch that thing down, and you know, I'm a fat bastard.
Yeah.
So, you know, being able to make all that weight stay on my waist is important to me.
Yeah, you're in good company. So
yeah, I think there's a lot of us. Yeah. So the weight belt's got a D-ring on it. And that D-ring, I clip a light to it sometimes. Other times I'll clip my gun to it when I'm getting drugged behind the boat. Yep. I use that D-ring constantly. I've got a red tie dive knife. I love those. I've got a polo sub suit. They're not real expensive.
I hear really good things about them though.
Oh, I love them. So again, I'm not exactly an off the rack guy, and I get into that polo sub suit. It's a 3 mil suit, and I've worn that suit in water as low as 65 degrees. So this summer we were diving into water that was as cold as 57, and the surface temperature was warmer. But I just love that suit. It's very comfortable.
Anything else in your dive bag?
Yeah, I've got everything in a dive shop. It seems like
you're a gear guy.
Exactly. Well, I've got GFT Carbonio fins. I love those. I've had them. I've had the pair that I have right now for 2 years, and I use them for swim or for pool training. I use them. I use them everywhere. And the one thing I'll tell you guys is spend a little bit of extra money and get carbon fiber fins. It makes a difference.
Just the proviso, like on that one, is like shore-based guys that are jumping in off rocks and that. Like the carbon fiber's got much better, and some of the manufacturers are pretty good, but they're not as robust as like a good set of composite or plastic fins. But I 100% agree with you. I wear carbons myself. I love them. Yeah,
I love them to death. They're great.
They make it easy. They make life easy.
They do, and I notice it immediately when I switch fins. It's like, oh my God, I'm carrying around 2 anchors on my feet. But it's not really that bad. But there are times where it's like I'm wondering why I'm working so hard.
I think the other thing I got when I started wearing carbons was the fatigue, like in your ankles and your legs. When you get home that night and the next day, it's just not there. Like Yeah, and then the other thing with that was wearing a set of foot pockets that actually fit properly. So
yeah, big time. Yeah, the thing is you're going to be in this stuff for hours and hours. So one of the best tips I can give people is buy stuff that fits and is comfortable. And if it's not comfortable, buy something else, or see if your local retailer will work with you a little bit. If they got demo stuff you can wear or try out. Life is too short to have blisters. So
I'd love to see every spearfishing shop with a little swimming pool out the back and trial gear. But the reality is most shops can't afford it. It's tricky. But yeah, I 100% agree with you. It's nice to try before you buy. Sometimes the pool training groups can be a real good place to try out gear as well, because everyone's got stuff. I think I sold like Larry from Penetrator Fins sort of sponsors the show, and just by letting people use my fins at training, a lot of people went out and bought them. So it's weird. People just want to have a go before they buy something, especially when you're spending big money.
Well, and that's something in freediving classes. A lot of times I'll set somebody up with a demo set of fins to use while they're out in open water. And usually what I'll do is I'll have them do that, and then I'll have them put on a set of plastic fins. They don't want to take those carbon fibers back off.
Yeah, that's an easy upsell, that one, once you've had them on.
Yeah, it's pretty horrible. So the couple other things. I mentioned that I put a shark shield in my bag. I'm a believer. Flashers, man. I do not leave home without flashers.
Yeah, nice.
Throw flashers. Everybody thinks, you throw a throw flasher and a wahoo's going to come in and you're going to shoot the wahoo. Yeah, that happens. But a couple of weeks ago, we were out on the reef. It was right before grouper season closed. And I threw the flasher in, and I'm just watching it drop. We're in 10 meters of water. And I didn't see anything on the bottom. But I figured, well, what the hell? Give it a try. Nothing came in. So I dropped down. And as I get down to the bottom and I start swimming over to where the flasher is, there's a big grouper sitting right in front of it.
Yeah, righto.
All right. Well, now he came home for dinner. So that was a red group. That was a red grouper, and I don't feel as bad about shooting them. So.
Yeah. So that's a throw flasher. Is that a pipe style throw flasher, or?
Yeah, I do both. I've got a whole bunch of different ones that I've made over the years, but blade style and the pipe ones. The pipe ones that I make sink at a rate of about a foot every 2.5 to 3 seconds.
Okay.
And the blade style is slower than that. It about a foot every 5 seconds. So to put that into metric, with the blade style, you're looking at about a meter every probably 10 to 15 seconds.
Okay. Yeah, that's nice.
It's slow. With the pipe one, it's about 3 times as fast.
Yeah.
So, or at least twice as fast. So I give you guys a little tip that I use. We're in 10 meters of water, and I've got a ledge in front of me, and or not in front of me. I'm on the surface, and I'm looking down at it. So I'll throw the throw flasher out into the sand, a little distance in front of the ledge, and then I'll let it sink all the way down to the sand. I can't tell you how many times a reef fish has come out to go check out the flasher, and then he's going back in underneath. Now I know he's there, so I can set up a stalk and go down and pop that fish.
Yeah, nice.
It's little crazy things like that I figured out that one, you've got to be patient. I guess you could just swim down there and swim along the edge, maybe get lucky. But when you know they're there, you can actually put together a game plan. And some of these fish are pretty cagey. So
yeah, it's pretty cool to hear how it's working on reef fish. Like, because a lot of the time we just think of it for getting, king mackerel or some pelagic species. But yeah, that's really cool. I like it.
Yeah, I always use them. I always have them in my belt. And I would say that for mackerel in particular, probably 90% of the mackerel that I've shot over the last 10 years have come in on a throw flasher.
Yeah,
so,
right.
They just can't help themselves. And Barracuda, oh my God, they fall in love with it, touch it 3 or 4 times, and then they get a headache. But if you can get them distracted, anything that you can do to put yourself in a better situation to take that fish. At the end of the day, it's about taking it quickly and ethically. So,
yeah, no, I love it.
Yeah.
Any parting stuff with gear, or should we move on to Spearo Q&A?
No, we can move on to Spearo Q&A. Yeah.
Cool. I'm going to pick 3 or 4 sort of faster paced questions, and then we'll wrap this sucker up, Ed. But what is the single best piece of advice you've ever been given for spearfishing?
Speed isn't your friend. Slow down and relax. Just slow down. If you think you're going slow enough, slow down some more.
Who's the best person in your life to go spearfishing with, and why?
The guy that's going to be there when I get back up to the surface.
Okay. Give me some names.
Go.
Who are some of your favorite dive buddies?
So I dive with a guy named Luke Fleiter down the road every now and then. Steve Padigas.
Okay.
Charles O'Connor.
Yeah.
And his partner in crime, Murphy.
Okay.
Brian Murphy.
Cool. It's good to have a dive crew, people you can rely on. Yeah, like when you guys are or new ladies are trying to break into crews, it can be a real hard thing. It's just finding that reliable crew. They show up, they pay up, they help out, and they got your back. And they're worth gold. And
to kind of ingratiate yourself with people, offer to pay for gas, ask what you can bring and what you shouldn't bring, and then maybe tone it down a little bit. I got a friend that went out one time and he kind of made an ass of himself yelling at a boat that went by. And the guy that owned the boat didn't really care for it very much. And, can't say I blamed him. Now, he got invited back out, but it was one of those things where he had a lot of reservations about it, inviting him back out.
Yeah, it's a red flag.
Yeah.
And depending on who it is, sometimes you only get one of those. Yeah. All right, what's the single best resource for improving your spearfishing?
Well, I think it's the Noob Spearo podcast, obviously.
I was hoping for the answer, man. It was a loaded question.
I figured that there, in fact, I've even written it down. You are ! Noob Spearo has taught me a lot. So, but
awesome.
I've also got a couple of people out there that I lean on. So there's a guy named, we talked about him briefly before the interview, GR Tar. He lives up in the Tampa Bay area. The guy's been spearfishing almost as long as I've been alive. And he's just an awesome dude. If I got a weird problem or something, I'll call him up and ask him an opinion. And I talked to Jerry Guerrera at Neptonics an awful lot too.
Last question, Ed. Could you describe what the spearfishing experience means to you in one sentence?
Oh, what does it mean to me in one sentence? For me, it's pretty simple. It's how I relax. For me, it's one of those things. It's absolutely a passion, but it's how I relax. When I have a really shitty week or something crazy happens, if I go spearfishing, I come back and I'm recharged. I'm good. Yeah.
Hey, Ed. Not only did we do one awesome interview, but we've had two now. I'd encourage people to head back and listen to our episode on spear gun building. But today was bloody awesome. I hope people that are interested in spearfishing in the Florida Keys check in and see you at Killshot Spearguns in Isla Morada. Did I say that right?
Yep. Close. Yep. Isla Morada. But
Isla Morada, yeah.
Hold it against you, so.
Yeah, I'm just a Kiwi. What do you do, man?
Exactly.
I was flat out just getting through intermediate, let alone high school. People can come and find you. I'll link it up in today's show notes. So if we go to noobspearo.com/ed2, and I'll have links to Killshot Spearguns on Instagram, YouTube. People can come and check out your shop, your website. But yeah, awesome, Ed. Thanks, man.
Awesome. Thank you. I really had a great time, Shrek.
Cool, man. We're out of here. Let's do it.
All right.
Ed Martin, what a cool dude. And also a patron listener of the show. Some mad takeaways today about diving in the Florida Keys, and just an awesome, solid dude. Really good to yarn to and just talk spearfishing. You can see passion is evident, and there's always takeaways from these guests. And Ed was just fantastic to join me for a second time. If you really enjoyed it, go back and listen to the DIY Timber Spear Gun, because that was a cracker episode as well. That was a 1, 2, 3 Ed Martin, the DIY wood spear gun. In 2 weeks, we are off to talk with some Kiwi marine scientists, and we get geeky and fish nerdy on the marine environment, and it's pretty cool. Blair Herbert joins me. He sort of helped tee this thing up, and I got 3 of them on the line, and I'm not sure how great the audio quality is going to be, just a warning in advance, but nevertheless I really enjoyed it, and always learn a few things when you talk to these people that this is what they do all the time, and they're super stoked about it. And as usual, if you love the show, leave a review, but also come to patreon.com/noobspearo, jump on and become a patron listener. Every single dollar raised goes to funding trips where I get to come out and hang out with listeners, record live podcast interviews on the road, and actually go spearfishing. So yeah, all good. Catch you in a fortnight. It's 2 weeks. Marine scientist interview. Let's do it. Killshot spear guns. Timber guns made in the USA. Simple, effective, dependable, made in the Florida Keys by Ed Martin. These spear guns are an absolute work of art. Check them out at killshotspearguns.com. And hey, I've got a special for you, $30 off. Use the code NOOB. That's just NOOB, N-O-O-B. For a limited time only, save $30 on any spear gun at Killshot Spearguns. Save $30 on any spear gun. Check it out. This episode of the Noob Spearo podcast is brought to you by spearfishing.com.au. They've been on board for more than 100 episodes, and I'd love for you to shop at spearfishing.com.au. They have a price beat guarantee, hassle-free returns, flat shipping rates across Australia, and you can save $20. For every purchase over $200, if you use the code NoobSpearo, you save $20. Thanks for supporting the Noob Spearo podcast and shopping with spearfishing.com.au.